Money FM 89.3. Best of breakfast. Morning Shot.
Welcome to Morning Shot. With President-elect Donald Trump returning to the White House in just a couple of weeks, there has been intense interest in how the Republican will carry out his immigration agenda, including a campaign pledge promising mass deportations. In addition, from tax reductions and cuts in government spending to raising tariffs, Trump's economic proposals could result in big changes in fiscal policy in 2025. So what's in store for Americans as Trump makes his political comeback? For more insights, we're joined by Charles Lipson, Professor Emeritus from the Department of Political Science at University of Chicago. Welcome, Charles. How are you?
Pleasure to talk with you this morning.
Yeah, pleasure is all mine as well. I suppose you're having a great start to the new year. Let's have a quick comment from you on the recent attack in New Orleans, where an Army veteran driving a pickup truck that bore the flag of the Islamic State group wrought carnage on New Orleans New Year celebration that killed 15 people as he steered around a police blockade and slammed into people before being shot dead. Do you think this is a politically motivated attack?
It sure looks like a combination of a politically motivated attack and maybe a personal problem. He was in the midst, apparently, of a divorce. So what we don't know is how many other people were involved. This may have been a cell. And if it was a cell, then that's a big deal. There was supposed to be a big American football game in New Orleans tonight. That has been postponed for 24 hours because nobody is sure if they really have rounded up the entire group that did this horrible thing.
Yeah, not an ideal start to the new year, at least in New Orleans.
It links in with what you were asking about, which is what Trump's agenda will be, and it will begin with immigration. He was elected in no small part to get immigration under control, and people will expect him to do that. We don't know. We know that the person who did this was an American citizen, but we don't know if there were people who came across the border who helped him. It's been a big issue in America, and it was one of the issues that helped elect Donald Trump.
Yeah, well, Trump has talked about, carrying out what he's called the largest deportation program in American history. Charles, how realistic is it for him to implement such a plan?
First part of it will be quite realistic. That is, getting people out of the country who have been convicted of crimes or who have already been adjudicated and told to leave the country. The problem comes with so many millions of people who have actually lived in the country for a long time and who may have American children, because if a child is born in the United States, even if a parent came here illegally, that child is an American citizen. So there are real complications down the road. The other big agenda item for Donald Trump will be tax cuts. The way that the American budget is scored, his original tax cuts were set to expire later this year. That was simply a technical issue, but he will have to get those taxes passed again and perhaps extended, and then the question will be, how will you pay for that?
Yeah, so some of those provisions that are set to expire at the end of this year are the current individual tax brackets and standard deduction. What do you foresee happening if Congress cannot agree on an extension?
I don't know. And before Congress begins that work, they have another big issue, which is they have to elect a speaker. As your listeners know, American Congress is divided into two portions, the House and the Senate, and each has a leader from the party that has the most seats in that branch. And in the House, there's only a very narrow Republican majority, and until a speaker is sworn in, the president himself cannot be sworn in. So it's a very big deal because the Republicans have a small edge here, and some people who are part of the party have said, well, we're not going to go along with this.
Yeah, I believe you're referring to House Speaker Mike Johnson, who's facing a pretty tough fight to retain the gavel, even though he's been endorsed by Trump. What do you think this says about the GOP's effectiveness?
I think it raises big questions about it. But the problem is that it's a narrow majority. And if they had a slightly larger majority, they would have a much better chance of getting through the Trump agenda. Nancy Pelosi had a very small majority when she led the House of Representatives as a Democrat, but she was extremely effective. And the question is, can any Republican come close to the quality of her leadership? The cliche is, can you round up cats? It's hard to do.
So if we were to look at the current balance of power, Charles, in Congress and how difficult it might be for Trump to implement his agenda, you talked about taxes, immigration as well. Do you think there will be more gridlock? Are you expecting compromises to be made along the way? How do you see this playing out?
I doubt there'll be many compromises. There may be a few Democrats who come over and vote with Republicans on some issues and vice versa. But I suspect that the Democrats who come over to vote with the Republicans in the House will be people from districts that Donald Trump carried in the presidential election. So those people will fear that if they don't go along with some of these issues, they risk being thrown out of office themselves.
All right, let's come back to a tactic that Trump used during his first presidency, which was the threat of tariffs and the deployment of armed soldiers to steer Mexico into beefing up enforcement along its U.S. border. Do you think he'll be using a similar playbook this time around? How might that play out?
He will definitely attempt to use it. I think the thing that's important to remember about Trump is that he is at heart a negotiator. He has some basic principles. He wants lower taxes. He wants less regulations. By the way, that's going to be a big issue because he has put Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy in charge of lowering regulations. But I think he'll try to negotiate. And then the question, he'll be negotiating all over the world. It's not just one place. He's got these negotiations with Mexico. He has them with Canada. He has them with Europe about paying for more of the joint defense. There are big issues with regard to Taiwan and big issues with regard to Iran, and particularly Iran's nuclear program. So all of these are major question marks that your listeners are going to be paying attention to over the next year.
Yeah, indeed they will. And this leads me to the question about, speculation about how Trump's leadership could shape politics in the next few years and perhaps even for future generations as well. Do you believe that his brand of populism will continue to dominate the Republican Party? And how might that impact the political landscape, not just this year, but in, the years or even decades ahead?
I think you put your finger on the most important issue in American domestic politics. I think it will change the scope. The right way to think of this is that the Democrats changed the way that American politics was done under Franklin Roosevelt in the 1930s. And Trump wants to change it again with a long-term change. That's why he picked as his vice president someone who will go along with this populist agenda. And it is likely that the people who will run against J.D. Vance, the vice president, in the next election will come from the same wing of the party. That is the dominant wing of the party. It is not internationalist, it's nationalist. It does favor these kind of tariffs. It does want to restrict immigration. And these are going to be huge fights. But there's going to be a huge fight within the Democratic Party as well, because they were not just a loser this time. They have to figure out what their agenda will be going forward.
All right, well, we're about 18 days away from that presidential inauguration when Trump 2.0 officially kicks off. So we'll wait and see, I guess, with bated breath as to how it all transpires. Charles, it's been a pleasure to have you on the show. Thanks, and wishing you a Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you and all your listeners as well.
Thank you so much. That was Charles Lipson, Professor Emeritus from the Department of Political Science at the University of Chicago. Stay with Money FM 89.3.
To listen to more great interviews, download our podcasts at audio.sg or download the audio app. That's AWEDIO, audio at the App Store and Google Play.